All right, so one of the most common questions I see in the comment sections of my videos on internet forums and anything to do with bike is, what bike should I get? I'm gonna do my best to explain what kind of bike you should get, and we're gonna give it a few parameters. We're specifically talking about mountain bikes, and we're also going to be talking about the most general type mountain bike, which is a full suspension bike. All right, before we get into this, I do wanna make give you some contextual information about my thought process. So, I am a former BMX racer. I raced BMX all throughout my youth. I dirt jumped, I did everything BMX related, and then I eventually transitioned to mountain biking. And when I started mountain biking, you had two options. You had cross country and you had downhill. Trail biking wasn't really a thing yet, so I chose the cool thing, downhill. Downhill was cool. So my background is in downhill racing and BMX. I raced downhill professionally for many years, raced World Cups, I've won collegiate national championships. I'm pretty decorated. I'm not the best rider in the world, but I'm definitely no slouch. My riding tends to be on the upper echelon of riders. I'm not the best, but I'm definitely not the worst. With that information in mind, we're gonna talk about the three primary types of full suspension bikes you can buy now. You have your short travel trail bike, you have your long travel trail bike, and you have your enduro bike. This is my medium travel, this is my short travel, and behind me, the one that you've probably seen most often is my long travel enduro bike. The categories are kind of, they're all over the place. Some people will call this an enduro bike, some people will call that an enduro bike, and some people will call that an enduro bike. It's complicated. Enduro started as a racing discipline, and then that racing discipline got applied to the bike type. Trail bikes have been around for pretty much ever. However, now there's a little bit more nuance because we have more options. So now some trail bikes are built up with long travel forks, and they're built up really beefy, so they kind of get close to that enduro category. Some of them are built up with lighter parts and have less travel, and they get closer to the cross-country category. It's really hard to place a bike in a specific category, but I'm gonna do my best to break down what the three categories are. Enduro is basically, you wanna ride downhill, but you don't have a lift. So you're gonna have to pedal your way up to the top. You wanna hit some big features, and you want a lot of chunk natural terrain, you have a lot of travel, and the great thing about having a lot of travel is it helps you deal with a lot of uncertainties. Sometimes you don't know what's on the backside of a feature, so having a little bit extra travel can help get you out of a situation that you didn't realize you're putting yourself in. It's kind of a lifesaver. An enduro bike is what I bring to a bike park when there's a good chance that I'm going to do some things that might have some questionable landings. That's not the bike that I ride the most. The bike that I probably ride the most is a short travel trail bike. Most of our trails are fairly mellow. We want to go for a quick climb, get out. I don't want to travel too far to get to anything that's super steep, so I'll ride what's nearby. And some of our trails aren't that steep. This thing makes the downhills pretty fun because it's pretty light and maneuverable. However, I'm not gonna go as fast on this. I'm gonna be a little bit more careful with my line choice. I'm gonna be a little more diligent. I'm not just going to go send it blind into a rock garden. I'm going to pick my line through it. I can hit a lot of the same features and ride a lot of the same stuff on all three of these bikes. On this bike, I have to be a lot more precise. I don't have any margin of error. If you live in a flatter area, but you still wanna be able to go to the occasional bike park, I think short travel trail bikes are the bee's knees. They're great. I've ridden them for years. You can do almost anything on it. I'm sponsored by GT, but it really doesn't matter what brand you get. Every bike company kind of makes a bike in one of these categories. This thing is pretty fun for almost everything. I will go slow at a bike park on it. However, for a lot of people who primarily ride trails and will go to the bike park occasionally, it's kind of a perfect fit. Because of its travel, you are going to be a little bit limited on what you can do. Assuming you're coming from a trail riding background, maybe more of an endurance, having a little bit more travel gives you a little bit more comfort room to learn how to progress. I find that maybe for riders who are looking to push the envelope, maybe they do want to step it up into the next travel bracket. I haven't explained the travels. This thing is 140 in the front, 120 in the back. Some people will call that a down country bike. If you're a downhill rider, this is a cross country bike. If you're a cross country rider, this is an enduro bike. It's incredibly confusing, but forget about it. So this thing is a short travel trail bike. This over here is a long travel trail bike, or just a trail bike. It has 150 in the front and 140 in the back. I got a little bit more room to play here. I can send it a little bit more risky with this thing and not question things as much. But this thing pedals really well, so if I'm going on a ride, or if I'm going on a trip where I'm going to go do a decent amount of pedaling, and a decent amount of descending, I want to have my options open. This is what I take. This bike is probably the best all-around bike. If I'm recommending a bike to somebody, it's going to be something in the 150, 140 travel range. It pedals great. You can go to bike parks and not bat an eye, and they're a lot of fun. So this is a bike that you could actually race an enduro on. You probably wouldn't want to go like do some of the gnarlier enduro races, but for a lot of the smaller enduros, this is a great bike. It handles a chunk. It's pretty pedal efficient. Pedal efficient. Ugh, I hate that. The bike pedals well, and it's kind of the do-it-all bike. When wouldn't I choose this bike? Hard, because it's kind of like the do-it-all. But if I'm going on a trip where I'm going to go to Whistler and I know I'm going to be riding a lot of primarily lift service biking, shuttles, things where I'm not going to have to think about pedaling as much because we're going to skip that step, that's when we're going to jump into the bigger bikes, the Enduro bike. Enduro bikes, again, this category is not exactly well defined, but it's generally in the 170 to 160 travel range, plus or minus a few. This red bike in the back, the Big Mac, that is my Enduro bike. That's the bike that I ride the most on this channel when you're watching a video. It's not the bike that I'm going to choose when I'm going for a quick pedal. It's big, it's slower around flat turns, a little bit sluggish on flat terrain. It has a lot of suspension, and so if you're trying to pop it off the ground, you have to put a lot more energy into getting it off the ground. So it's going to be a little bit more sluggish compared to its shorter travel counterparts. Why would you want that? Well, these things come to life when you start going fast. When you start getting a lot more rough terrain, when you get it up to speed, that's when those bikes really come to life. A lot of people ask me if they should get a downhill bike, and I usually try to steer them towards a long travel enduro bike. You can basically ride almost the same stuff. You can take it out of the bike park and climb up a hill. Maybe it's not the most fun climb ever, but I've taken this thing on almost 30-mile rides in Moab, and you know what? I survived. The great thing about enduro bikes is, yes, you can race enduro, but you can also race downhill on an enduro bike. However, if you want to be really competitive in the downhill field, that's when you want to step it up into the big leagues and get a downhill bike. Now, I have a downhill bike. I have literally not touched it since the last race I did last summer. They're great bikes. They're the Formula Ones of the mountain bike. However, they're pretty good at doing one thing and one thing only. If you don't have a lift service or shuttle service bike park near you, I steer people away from getting downhill bikes entirely. So with that in mind, I tend to like to size down on bikes a lot of times. A smaller bike, smaller travel that is, forces me to be a little bit more precise with my wheel placement. I have less room for error. So sometimes I like the shorter travel bike because it keeps you honest. But sometimes I wanna disregard all of that and I just wanna go straight and fast. That's when I take the Enduro bike. And then when I want something in between, I'll take my regular trail bike. Here are some real life trips, and I'll let you know what bike I chose. Last year, we went to Sentier-du-Moulin. I took this bike. This bike, great for pedaling and great for the downhills. I've also taken my long travel trail, or my Enduro bike there, but the climb sucked. But the downhills are fun. However, a lot of those downhills aren't very steep. If I were to do it again, I would still choose this bike. But again, that's coming from someone who used to race downhill. All right, it's after work and we're going for a ride at our local spot. That's when I take this thing. It's quick, zippy, fun. My lining choice has to be a little bit more accurate. For the stuff around me that we go to, there's not much that's gonna get me in trouble that I don't know how to deal with. So this thing is kind of the bee's knees around here. Now, let's say I'm going to the Pacific Northwest. I'm going to BC. We're gonna ride to Whistler. We're gonna ride the stuff in north of Vancouver. We're gonna start getting into the chunk. That's when the big bike comes out, because I can shuttle up the hills or I can take the lift up the hills. And compared to what we have here, I'm a little bit more out of my comfort zone than riding around here. So I want a little bit more squish to get me out of some unknown situations. Also, if you're going on a trip and you're riding day after day after day, having a little bit more squish to give your forearms a little bit of a break, let the bike do the job, is nice because that means you can ride more throughout the week and get more value from your trip. But if you have to pedal, maybe And that's where things get a little bit complicated. Okay, I don't think I answered the question very well. Here's my pro tip. Pick a bike. Doesn't matter which one. Whatever bike you choose, you're probably going to be happy with. You learn what you like by riding different bikes. And sometimes a bike that's not the right thing for you will help you determine, hey, next time, this is probably closer to what I'm looking for. And if you want any of these fine, dandy GT bikes, you can buy them on their website. It's kind of new. GT hasn't been selling bikes on their website, but now you can buy them directly from gt.com or whatever their website is. I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's GT Bicycles. Or you can go to your local bike shop because they have bikes too. Anyway, peace out, Cub Scout.